to Assessment Joining the Dots, our monthly podcast covering all things assessment. Thank you so much for supporting us and tuning in to listen to our latest episode on Turning the Page, tackling the myths and assumptions on reading in schools. We are GL Assessment or GL Education, depending on where you are in the world. We're a Renaissance company providing formative standardised assessments in the UK and Ireland, and we work with schools in over 100 countries worldwide. We're doing this podcast because we're passionate about supporting all of you to make the best use of insights from your data, whether to inform teaching and learning strategy or to help guide personalised learning decisions. We're here for you. If you've listened to our previous podcast episodes, then you'll be familiar with our recurring segments, including our lightbulb moment and our data spotlights. We include these segments to demystify commonly used terminology within the wide world of standardised assessment data. So, whether you're using our assessments or not, if you feel like you could do with knowing a bit more about how assessment can be used to inform your practice, we hope that this podcast is for you. I'm Georgina Cook, one of our education specialists at GL. I led English and literacy in schools in the UK for over 20 years as a teacher before joining GL. I've got a wide range of experience leading and coaching, teaching colleagues in all things language and literacy. But my job now relies on that past experience to ensure that all of our language and literacy assessment and practice products are doing what schools need them to do. We know how hard schools are working to support the understanding and development of reading in schools. But with the National Literacy Trust reporting recently that reading of young people is the lowest it's ever been, it's a real challenge for teachers and leaders in school. And this challenge is being keenly felt in the classroom. The primary and secondary teachers surveyed in our recent Turning the Page report told us that on average, 1/3 of pupils they teach are weak readers. As a result, many pupils are struggling to learn. So we're all working so hard to make sure that we make a difference to the lives of young people. And I am passionate that all children, regardless of their starting point, have the best opportunities to develop their reading skills. We want to enable teachers to understand their data in a way that allows them to personalise learning, as we know that this is when pupils will make the most progress. I'm really excited about today's episode, as it will be the first time that we've used one of our podcasts to talk about data in a way which directly feeds into one of our practice products. Now that we're part of the Renaissance family, we're able to provide schools with the information they need to understand children's reading needs, and then talk to them about a practice product like myON, which they can use as an integral component of their teaching and learning to upskill teachers and support learners with their language development. Using a standardised, robust reading assessment like our new group reading test or STAR reading assessment will provide you with the insight into what your pupils need in terms of their reading development. This can then lead the way into being confident in what those next steps might be. So we're adding a slight twist to our usual format today, and we're going to kick the episode off with our data spotlight. Here's Gemma and Sadie shining light on myON, one of our practice products, what it is, and how it can support personalised learning following on from your reading assessment.
Now, it might not be news to you that strong readers have the tools to become successful communicators, access wider and more challenging curriculums, and equip children with key life skills so that they're ready to confidently make their way into the world. The crucial role of educators is ensuring that all learners can fulfil that potential at the end of their school journey.
Yes, thanks, Sadie. And this is all against the background of an ever-changing world where it's increasingly more difficult to encourage learners to read. What with factors such as greater social media use and less interest in reading for pleasure, sustained reading and embedding key literacy skills are just more important than ever. It's therefore vital that all educators feel like they are well supported with combating such a prevalent issue.
Absolutely. And what with the focus of this month's podcast being about myON and how it can support educators with learners' reading progress, Gemma, I just wondered if you could take a moment to explain what myON is and how it can support staff with the reading needs of their learners.
Yes, definitely. In a nutshell, myON is a digital learning platform which aims to enhance pedagogy across the curriculum, as well as providing greater opportunities to just get learners reading. With myON, teachers have a range of resources relevant to the topics that they teach, which they can use to model good reading skills, such as explicit vocabulary teaching, note-taking, annotation, highlighting. I could go on. Additionally, it provides pertinent subject matter which is relevant to different curriculum areas. All of this means that myON can help to address the strengths and challenges for individual learners.
A great summary there, Gemma. Now, as you'll know, if you've listened to the second episode of Assessment Joining the Dots, which focuses on reading, you'll remember NGRT, or our new group reading test. This is our standardised termly reading assessment, which not only gives you the standard age score for learners, but it also outlines the strengths and challenges that cohorts, groups and individual learners may be facing with their reading. It can provide staff with that vital information about learners' word and sentence level reading, as well as their ability to actually comprehend what they've read. There's obviously a wide range of data revealed from NGRT, which can then in turn help schools to identify exactly what support may be necessary for the learners that they teach.
Yes, as we're discussing here, the teaching of reading is a really complex activity. Children need to learn specific skills and learn them in an order which will support their comprehension development, and this will then allow them to develop as readers. Information generated from standardised assessments, such as NGRT, will give an indication of learners' abilities in terms of skills, such as inference, deduction, acquiring language, learning new vocabulary. And myON can then offer a platform which allows the teacher to model for children, clarify, summarise, and interrogate the text. And ultimately, this will help you address the areas of priority for each learner.
As Gemma and Sadie explained, helping teachers access the resources they need to be able to confidently teach reading will equip more children and young people with the reading and literacy skills they need for life. Ensuring teachers are confident, responding to reading need, supporting weaker readers, and stretching those more skilled readers is key. I'm really excited to hand over to Margaret to speak to a school which is doing just that. Today, we're joined by Richard Slade, who is Executive Head Teacher at Plumcroft Primary School in London, and Alicia Whytock, Head of School.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Margaret Allen. I am a former primary school teacher, and my role at the moment is a curriculum and education specialist at Renaissance Learning. And I'm absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to speak to Richard and Alicia. Richard, would you like to introduce yourself? Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's Richard Slade. I'm Executive Head Teacher of Plumcroft Primary School in Greenwich, which is a large school across 2 campuses with just over 1,000 children. So that's keeping us busy.
And Alicia.
Hi everyone, I'm Alicia Whytock. I'm the head of school at Plumcroft Primary, our Vincent Road campus, which is our new campus, and we currently have pupils from nursery to year 5.
Amazing. Thank you both. So 1,000 pupils across 2 campuses in the East End of London. Richard, how does that work with EdTech then? How do you keep a handle on what's going on in your 2 campuses with all those children and all those teachers and all those people and moving parts?
Yeah, I think that's where EdTech from my side of things is really key, because with 1,000 children, we've got 150 staff. Keeping track of standards and progression and working out where the gaps in learning are is a key thing. And so our journey started back in 2014 when the new national curriculum came in and levels were disappearing. We needed systems that gave us standardized scores rather than levels and sub-levels, which were disappearing. And so that's when we used the assessment systems from Renaissance to give us that data. And then we get summative and formative outcomes from it. So it's fundamental that we can look at individual pupil level, class level, we can look at different demographics, and it just allows us to understand where the gaps are, and then we plug them quickly so that we're not teaching generically, we're teaching very specifically to what children don't know, and that's how we accelerate the learning and have great outcomes.
And I think it's probably true to say, isn't it, that not all teachers are sitting there thinking, oh, yes, I'm really excited about the data. I really want to know about what these numbers mean. It's actually then putting that information into practice from a teaching and learning point of view. And Alicia, I would suggest that's probably more your bag. Is that right?
Yes, so I think that with tools like STAR assessments, it's really easy to actually train teachers in how to interpret that data. I think we've put a big focus on looking at the individual reports and how we use those with parents and carers to share the targets, but also how we use the focus skills to actually build the curriculum and give teachers that flexibility to really cater the learning to the needs of the children. So I think it's been a really positive, particularly lower down the school, to start using some of these assessment tools in reception and year one. And I think there's a certain level of comfort that's come from them, from teachers, that they're actually, it's consistent across all of the classes. And for us, it means, the data is really secure. Because I know prior to that, our assessment systems in reception in year one were quite, teacher focused and teacher led, which can obviously lead to some inconsistencies.
Of course, and that's where EdTech comes into its own. And I know here at Renaissance, obviously now we have GL assessment as part of the Renaissance family. And on both sides, if I can say that for this moment, we are very proud of the validity and the fidelity of what schools are getting from our assessment systems. So if we dial back to 2020, the year that was, and hopefully we never go to again, how did the pedagogy change for Plumcroft across the two campuses, given everything that we've just talked about?
Yeah, I think because the key bit of all learning is that the prerequisite is that children are very comfortable readers for meaning. So our big concern during the pandemic was how can we get children continuing to engage in learning. We briefly thought about things like worksheets and posting things out, and that was like 30 seconds before we went, no, that's just silly with any children, but 1,000 is just not sustainable. Unfortunately, because we'd already embedded a system called myON, which is a library of about 8,000 books. It allowed us, we weren't starting something new, the children knew how to use it. We used it in just a school context, but it very quickly became our key delivery method during the whole of the pandemic, so that our class teachers created projects, and it allowed me, from the executive head point of view, to create a focus of energy, and then the teachers created individual projects, and it allowed us to ensure that we directed children's learning through their reading, so that we didn't just say, right, here's 7,000 books, pick and choose what you want to read and hope for the best. It was very curated to ensure that children engaged with the learning in a way that made sense. So it was a piece of work, but the teachers were just phenomenal. I think we created something like 50 projects within about 2 weeks, ready to launch. And, Alicia was part of that key team.
Yeah, so I was actually teaching a year one class at that point. So I've got sort of slightly different perspective to Richard, in that I was creating the projects for the children and setting them. And I found it a really creative way of initiating distance learning, because obviously you can assign all of the books on myON to the project, and really create that love of reading at home. But also you can link tasks, so we would set written tasks for the children, and actually when we had our weekly Hello Zoom sessions, they would often want to share things that they'd got done. They'd been inspired by the projects, but they will have gone and created something that was not part of the project, but, having learnt from those texts. So we did a project on kindness, and they created, beautiful texts about rules of how to be kind, things like that, and really went over and above. Some of them made big canvases linked to the projects that they would show in the Zoom session the next week. So I do feel those projects really inspired the children during quite a difficult time for them as well.
I'm really excited to hear that, because I think often myON gets pigeonholed as this digital library of books. And I'm a firm believer that, well, I'm sure you would agree that any EdTech is only an enhancement of good teaching and learning. And if the teacher is at the heart of that initiation and that sort of excitement and motivation and a catalyst to enable children to dig deeper, and it sounds like that's exactly what happened.
And I think my fascination with using myON was that it worked every time, which was the key bit. But because the systems knew what children were reading, how long they were reading it for, whether they'd finished the books, it directed all of our interventions. So 2 elements to that. One was, clearly our job is to maintain standards and enhance outcomes as opposed to just tick over. And from all the Education Policy Institute did a whole research using Renaissance data during the pandemic for the DFE. And that was showing learning loss, the months of learning loss in reading, which were nationally were quite significant because of the way we were doing it. And we were making it up as we went along, but in a structured way and just going at it. We actually bucked the trend completely. So we actually had it sounds a horrible phrase, but we had a good pandemic in terms of pupil outcomes, because myON, having this curated approach by class teachers, allowed us to keep the acceleration of learning and equity of access as well, which we can talk about in a bit in terms of free school meal, children from deprived backgrounds. Our data was fascinating with that. So it really engendered a whole strategic approach. So if we were seeing children not engaging in reading, that's what directed our intervention programs to make sure phone calls were, understanding why children weren't engaging, and the systems allowed us to know that.
I was just going to say on the flip side of what you're saying. So saying that, obviously myON is a lot more than a digital library. Our teachers have used it extensively to enhance their class teaching, but also it is useful as a digital library, in the sense that with some of our guided reading sessions, particularly in sort of year one, you're trying to do whole class guided reading session. And I know from previous Ofsted inspections that it's been hard with guided reading for the actual quality of some of the tasks that the children are doing independently to be really good and for them to stay focused, particularly with younger children. With myON, that is something that it does engage them, and they, are reading or are read to, with obviously the option of it being read aloud to them. I think that has been a game changer for guided reading, just in the sense that it's something very valuable, because we do not have that luxury of a teaching assistant in every class anymore. And I think that is where myON can be really useful as well.
I think that's a wonderful rendition, really, as a fast forward to 2024, where obviously children aren't at home. Generally, there may be the odd one or two, but they're back in the classroom, and myON is able to act as that platform, as you say, 24/7 access. So even if children haven't all got a device in their hand, they have got the opportunity to go home and read that book in advance of the lesson, or read that book after the lesson, to garner a little bit more in-depth analysis, comprehension skills, all that language acquisition stuff, which obviously I'm assuming a lot of your children have got EAL as part of their DNA. So that is another challenge, isn't it?
No, that's fine. I was just going to say, one of the fascinations for us because we were gathering all this data from the systems, we could then look at the difference between our pupil premium and non-pupil premium children. And the joy from my point of view was, we've always had a concern when we do home visits, the amount of actual books in homes from a deprived background. We have 35-40% of our children from deprived backgrounds. The access to reading stock, particularly during the pandemic, that was a big concern. And when we did our data analysis, we were showing our disadvantaged children relative to our non-disadvantaged pupils were accelerating their use of myON fivefold compared to our non-pupil premium children. And we hadn't kind of expected that or looked for it, but when you looked at the data, you could see this impact that we were giving children who wouldn't normally have had reading stock, or as much as you'd have hoped in homes. Suddenly they're in a curated way, because the teacher's guiding and leading it. They've got access to, and non-fiction as well was the joy for me,
Yes.
is that the children love non-fiction as a vehicle to sustained reading. We always imagine Harry Potter's and doing all the fictions and so on, but actually non-fiction as a way of getting children to be sustained readers is a very powerful thing that myON particularly made possible.
And I think that's very true with parents as well, isn't it? Being able to offer a platform that parents can engage with, because all parents want to do the best for their children. But once children are actually doing more than barking words off the page, how do they help that? What else can they do? And to have a platform they can all access together and talk about and engage and come out with some real strong conversations and discussions is just marvellous.
I think going back to what Richard just mentioned about the non-fiction text, also it's the way they've been used, as a hook for learning, or as a way into some of our foundation subjects. I think it's about 2 years ago now, isn't it, Richard, that we have changed from topic-based learning of the foundation subjects to teaching the subjects discretely. But with that sort of overhaul of the whole curriculum, obviously it comes, there's lots of resources that you need in terms of books to initiate some of those lessons. And actually, a lot of teachers have used and incorporated myON text into that. A bit similar to when we brought the digital leaders to you, Margaret, to see the rivers book. So that would be an example of one we'd use for geography. And that's been key, really, because we've had to make sure that we have those texts for those foundation subjects, but as well, with budgets and everything, to physically buy all of those texts for all of those children is a lot of money. So actually having them on myON to link into those topics and to our curriculum map across the whole school has been useful, as well as MFL, of course, with the Spanish books that we've put into our Key Stage 2 Spanish curriculum.
Goodness, you really are exploiting it to the hilt, and it's so lovely to hear. And obviously, you've got books in the classroom. We would never advocate that, children don't turn a page. And I would be very sad if anybody ever did say that. We've got to keep that sort of love of reading alive, and giving them bits of every element of the menu means that you're touching so many different areas of the curriculum, but also of the learning journey. Thank you both. It has been so lovely to hear you talking about myON in such a passionate way, but it's music to my ears to know that it's working for you, and with 1,000 children during a pandemic and now since. I don't know if there's anything else you'd just like to add at the end that you haven't had the chance to say before we close.
I think just briefly from my point of view as the exec head, at the end of the day, children reading is lovely, but actually they're reading for meaning, and it's progressing their learning so that they get at or above national standards. And I think, we had our Ofsted last June, and we don't do any of this for Ofsted, but it's a byproduct. And, that was a very strong, outstanding quality Ofsted. And it was very much focused on the quality of curricular development and the quality of reading. And the systems we're using allow us to really accelerate that learning so that we're very specific and targeted, and children aren't doing generic learning. It's very focused so that they accelerate more quickly, and it's transformational.
Thank you both very much. I'm looking forward to visiting. So let's get that date in the diary, and let's have a face-to-face conversation. Thank you for your time, your energy, your passion, and your knowledge.
Thank you.
What was the moment you realised the power of assessment data? And what was the impact of that realisation on your learners' experience? Our lightbulb moments allow us to share these crucial turning points with data. We love hearing about all of these fantastic things that schools are doing with their standardised assessments, and how these are impacting the learners that you teach. Who is sharing their story this month?
Hi everyone, my name's Louise Quinn and I work for the North East Learning Trust. So I've had many lightbulb moments since I started using the GL assessments and the data that they generate. But one that springs to mind was when combining sort of NGRT data with Cat4 data. So as you probably know, your NGRT SAS score should broadly match the verbal score for Cat4. So as somebody who likes to look at numerous sources of data at once and spot any patterns or anomalies, what I spotted was that there was a child who I knew, whose NGRT SAS score and verbal SAS score, they broadly match. So, I could trust essentially that data. However, what I found from that was that there was a significant difference, or a really significant difference of 20 SAS points between the verbal and the non-verbal, meaning that that child was actually a masked child. So his ability to use language was better than his understanding of language. And I found that really, really fascinating, because we have a few children like that. And it made me really think about actually what can we do in classrooms to support those children. Just simple strategies such as, checking for understanding, targeted questioning, etc. So yeah, that was my light bulb moment.
So to get involved and share your own light bulb moment, all you need to do is send us a WhatsApp voice note with your contribution to 07917 516 515. Again, a big thank you to all of you who have sent voice notes in so far. We love listening back to these, and we look forward to sharing more next time. Thanks so much for joining us for our Assessment Joining the Dots podcast. We hope you've enjoyed learning about how reading assessment and practice products can support teachers to become those all-important reading role models for our young people, inspiring them to see themselves as readers, confidently engaging in the world around them. If you would like any more information from us, please head to our training and support site, support.gl-assessment.co.uk or support.gl-education.com, depending on where you are in the world. You can tweet us using the handle @GL_assessment or @GL_education, and email us if you'd like to know more or contribute. We'd love to hear from you. The email address is podcast@gl-assessment.co.uk. Please do rate and follow our podcast, share with your friends and colleagues, and subscribe to be notified when new episodes are available. You can also check out the Renaissance Space podcast from our friends at Renaissance. So join us next time when we'll be joining the dots on Key Stage 2 SATs and explaining how these differ from standardised tests. Thanks so much for listening.